The statement did not come quietly. It did not come wrapped in diplomatic caution or strategic ambiguity. It came as a blunt warning, delivered in the unmistakable tone of a man who believes power is best exercised loudly. When former U.S. President Donald Trump told News Nation that Iran would be wiped off the face of the earth if an assassination attempt were made against him, the world did not just hear a threat. It heard the echo of a confrontation decades in the making. This was not merely rhetoric for domestic consumption. It was a signal, a message, aimed far beyond American borders, landing squarely in Tehran. To understand why this moment matters, we must first understand where it sits in history. The United States and Iran have not been allies since 1979, when the Iranian Revolution toppled the US-backed Shah and replaced him with an Islamic republic led by clerics hostile to Washington. Since then, relations have oscillated between cold hostility and near-direct conflict, marked by sanctions, proxy wars, covert operations, and carefully calibrated threats. What we are witnessing now is not an isolated outburst. It is the continuation of a long, volatile story. Trump's remarks came at a time when Iran is already under immense internal and external pressure. Domestically, the country has faced waves of anti-government protests, sparked by economic hardship, political repression, and social restrictions. Internationally, Iran remains heavily sanctioned, its economy constrained, its access to global markets limited, and its regional influence constantly challenged by the United States and its allies. Against this backdrop, any statement from Washington, especially one as incendiary as Trump's, lands with amplified force. In the interview, Trump framed his warning as a defensive measure. Responding to questions about alleged Iranian threats against him, he claimed he had already given orders. If anything were to happen to him, Iran would be annihilated. The language was stark. The whole country would be blown up, he said. This was not the language of deterrence as traditionally practiced by diplomats. It was the language of total destruction, reminiscent of Cold War-era doomsday scenarios. Iran's response was swift and equally uncompromising. The spokesperson for Iran's armed forces issued a direct warning of his own. Any attempt to assassinate Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he said, would result in the attacker's hand being cut off, symbolically and literally. More than that, he promised that those responsible would be destroyed, with no safe place left for them anywhere in the world. This was not merely a personal threat. It was a declaration that Iran views any attack on its leadership as an existential act of war. At this point, it becomes essential to ask, who is involved, and why does this matter beyond rhetoric? On the surface, this is a war of words between two powerful figures and the states they represent. But beneath that surface lies a complex web of interests, alliances, and calculations. The United States remains the world's largest military power, with a defense budget exceeding $800 billion annually, global military bases, and unmatched power projection capabilities. Iran, while far less powerful in conventional terms, wields significant influence through asymmetric warfare, proxy groups, and regional alliances stretching from Iraq and Syria to Lebanon and Yemen. Neither side truly wants a full-scale war. The cost would be enormous. For the United States, it would mean another Middle Eastern conflict with unpredictable consequences, draining resources and political capital. For Iran, it could mean catastrophic damage to infrastructure, loss of life, and the potential collapse of the regime. Yet both sides continue to edge closer to confrontation, driven by domestic politics, regional rivalries, and mutual distrust. Trump's role in this dynamic cannot be separated from his political identity. Throughout his presidency and beyond, he has projected strength as a central pillar of his leadership style. Threats, sanctions, and maximum pressure were hallmarks of his Iran policy, most notably his decision in 2018 to withdraw from the Iran nuclear deal. That decision reimposed severe economic sanctions on Iran, cutting its oil exports by more than half and triggering a sharp contraction in its economy. Inflation soared, the currency collapsed, and ordinary Iranians bore the brunt of the pressure. From Iran's perspective, Trump is not just a political figure. He is a symbol of American hostility. Iranian leaders have repeatedly blamed U.S. sanctions for economic suffering and have accused Washington of encouraging unrest within Iran. When Trump openly threatens annihilation, it reinforces the narrative that the United States seeks not behavior change, but regime destruction. This brings us to the strategic implications. Threats of total destruction alter the calculus of deterrence. Traditional deterrence relies on clarity, credibility, and restraint. When rhetoric escalates to existential levels, the risk of miscalculation increases dramatically. A single incident, an attack by a proxy militia, A cyber operation, a naval confrontation in the Persian Gulf, could spiral out of control, driven by the belief that the other side is already preparing for the worst. Economically, the stakes are global. Iran sits near the Strait of Hormuz, through which roughly 20% of the world's oil supply passes. Any military escalation could disrupt shipping, spike oil prices, and send shockwaves through global markets. Even the perception of instability in the region has historically been enough to push energy prices upward, affecting inflation and economic growth far beyond the Middle East. Politically, there are winners and losers in this tension. Hardliners in both Washington and Tehran benefit from confrontation. In the United States, portraying Iran as an existential threat can rally voters around a strongman image. In Iran, external threats strengthen the regime's claim that national unity is necessary to resist foreign aggression. Moderates, reformists, and ordinary citizens on both sides stand to lose the most. As of now, protests in Iran may have slowed, but the hostility between Tehran and Washington has not diminished in the slightest. If anything, it has entered a more dangerous phase, one where words themselves become weapons. And history teaches us that wars often begin not with missiles, but with statements that leave no room for compromise. The deeper question, then, is not what was said, but what happens next. To answer that, we must examine the future trajectories and the possible what-if scenarios that could emerge from this standoff. One possibility is controlled escalation. In this scenario, both sides continue to issue threats, impose sanctions, and engage in indirect confrontations through proxies, but stop short of direct military conflict. This has been the default pattern for years. Iran supports allied militias. The United States responds with targeted strikes or economic pressure. The danger here is cumulative. Each incident adds to a reservoir of resentment and mistrust, increasing the risk that one day the balance tips too far. Another scenario is miscalculation. A rogue actor, a misunderstood signal, or a misinterpreted intelligence report could trigger a rapid escalation. History is filled with examples where leaders did not intend war, yet stumbled into it. In a climate where leaders publicly threaten annihilation, the margin for error becomes dangerously thin. There is also the possibility of internal change. Iran's domestic situation remains fragile. Economic hardship, youth dissatisfaction, and demographic pressures continue to challenge the regime. If internal unrest were to intensify again, external threats could either suppress it by rallying nationalist sentiment or exacerbate it by stretching the state's resources thin. The outcome is uncertain, but the stakes are immense. From the American side, political change matters as well. Trump's statements reflect his personal style, but U.S. policy is shaped by institutions, allies, and strategic realities. A different administration might pursue de-escalation, renewed negotiations, or back-channel diplomacy. However, once extreme rhetoric enters the public domain, walking it back becomes politically costly. Internationally, other powers are watching closely. Russia and China both have strategic interests in Iran and in counterbalancing U.S. influence. The U.S.-Iran conflict could push Tehran closer to these powers, reshaping global alliances. European countries, meanwhile, fear the economic and security fallout of another Middle Eastern war and may seek to mediate, though their influence is limited. What then is the most likely outcome? In the near term, rhetoric will likely continue to outpace action. Both sides understand the catastrophic costs of open war. Yet the long-term trend is worrying. Each threat normalizes the idea of total confrontation. Each response hardens positions. Over time, the space for diplomacy shrinks. The final and most sobering what-if is this. What if the threats are taken literally? What if a leader believes that survival depends on striking first? In a world of advanced weapons, cyber capabilities, and regional proxies, such a belief could unleash consequences that no one fully controls. In the end, this moment is not just about Trump or Iran or even the United States. It is about the fragile architecture of global security, where words spoken into a microphone can reverberate across continents. Serious leadership demands not only strength but restraint. History will judge not who spoke the loudest, but who prevented the unthinkable. And as the world watches Washington and Tehran trade warnings, one truth remains clear. When threats escalate to promises of annihilation, everyone is already standing too close to the edge.